And we are live from the wonderful Sports Link studio in Muncie, Indiana. This is the HB Toss brought to you by the creative storytellers of Ball State Sports Link. I'm your host, AJ Swiatek, alongside co-host Sam Neiger. And Sam, it's been a crazy NFL week. I'm sure we're in for a good one.
It has, and it's been just a great NFL season so far. Thank you for having me. So excited to be here. Another great week to break down and another week's worth of predictions to be had here on the HB Toss.
Certainly, and before we move to Week 10, we've got to do Week 9 some justice. It was a crazy one, so I say we get into the first segment of the show, Week 9, the week prior, in 60 seconds. The Eagles, they stayed undefeated. They beat the Texans on Thursday Night Football by a score of 29-17. Then we moved to that Sunday slate, and it was an interesting one. The Lions, they stunned the Packers. They beat the Pack by a score of 15-9. That gave them their second win of the season. Then the Chargers, they edged out the Falcons in a 20-17 victory. I think everyone's going to want to talk about that double fumble play that led to that game-winning field goal. Then Zach Wilson, he moved to 5-1 on the season. The New York Jets, they knocked off Josh Allen and the Bills, and that AFC East division is looking to be wide open. The Jaguars, they came back from a 10-point deficit at halftime, going on a 17-0 run to end the game to beat the Raiders 27-10. Then for the Buccaneers, they came in, they moved to 4-5 as they beat the Super Bowl defending Rams. They've still only got 3 wins on the season. That 16-13 game, it was a close one, a battle of 2 disappointing teams. Then the Chiefs, they beat the Titans. Malik Willis and company, they only had 2 passing yards in the entirety of the second half, and I mean, that's never a recipe for success. And then finally, the week, I mean, I know you're going to want to talk about this one. The Patriots, they destroyed the Colts, and that led to Frank Reich. He's kicked out of town. In comes the new head coach, Jeff Saturday.
Yeah, unfortunate for the Colts that was the way that Reich went out. But as you mentioned, this week was just a microcosm for the entire NFL season, really. Lots of fun upsets, some great games, but I am certainly looking forward to seeing Jeff Saturday at the helm in Indianapolis, that's for sure.
Certainly. I know we'll get to that in a little bit later. You're definitely a Jeff Saturday believer. I mean, it's interesting. The only head coaching experience that he really has is at the high school level, and it's not like he had a crazy amount of success.
No, he definitely didn't. But what I love that he said in his press conference earlier this week is that if anybody knows how to lead a group of men, it's him, and I truly believe that. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame center, so much experience playing under Peyton Manning. He's a guy that I would let lead my franchise, and he's one of the most popular men in Indianapolis.
Certainly. You want to talk about a popular guy in Indy, the 5-time Pro Bowler. He'll come in and coach. That'll be interesting. We're actually going to get to the Colts here in a second. We'll move to our next segment, the biggest movers, the teams that have moved up and down in the week prior. We'll start on the green side, Sam. Moving up, the Seattle Seahawks, Geno Smith and company. I mean, they looked really good last week, picking up another win. All of a sudden, they're in command of that NFC West and really the NFC as a whole, other than Philly and the Vikings.
Yeah, so the NFC West is really interesting this year. Certainly we didn't expect the Seahawks to be the team in command, but I, as well as many other people around the league, have just fallen in love with Geno Smith this year. He's a guy that you love to root for, and to see these 4 straight wins now from the Seahawks, it's really something remarkable that nobody saw coming. I'm looking forward to see what they can do in the weeks to come, see if they can't make a deep playoff run.
Certainly. I mean, how could you not love Geno Smith, the current favorite to win Comeback Player of the Year? And I mean, for great reason. He's got the Seahawks cooking. They're playing good football. And another team that's been on a bit of a streak here, I mean, winning 5 of their last 6, the New York Jets.
Well, we know on the HB Toss, we can't go a whole show without mentioning the Jets, but we were chatting about this a little bit before the show as well. Zach Wilson is cooking right now. He hasn't been completely technically sound in every aspect of the game, but he knows how to lead his team, and as a unit, the Jets are finding ways to win tight games and against big opponents. Last week against the Bills, I know we touched on this in the Week 9 in 60, but it was a great win for the Jets, perhaps a franchise-defining win for the years to come.
Certainly, and I mean, it feels like Zach Wilson maybe not living up to that number 2 overall pick potential yet, but as a Jets fan, that almost makes it even more promising. This team is 6-3 with below-average quarterback play. Joe Flacco, he did nothing to impress me, and Zach Wilson, I mean, he's made some plays here and there, but he really has not made that huge second-year jump that I think a lot of us are waiting for. If that comes, I mean, it feels like this Jets team, they really can hang with the best of them.
Well, the way you talk about Zach Wilson off camera, you wouldn't know that it's been subpar quarterback play. Zach Wilson has a lot of room for improvement, but he's got the weapons around him. I look at the rookies. I look at Garrett Wilson and, of course, Sauce Gardner on defense. Those are the go-to guys right now for the Jets, and that's phenomenal. It's rare to see a rookie be a focal point on either side of the ball, really, in their first year, but the fact that the Jets have 2, that's a great sign for years to come.
Certainly, and I mean, it's really this entire roster that's so young. It feels like so many of the pieces, I mean, you mentioned the big 2, Jermaine Johnson, also a first-round pick there. Breece Hall, of course, he went down with the unfortunate ACL injury, but he was the favorite for Rookie of the Year before he went down. And then you look at last year's class, we talked about Zach Wilson, Elijah Vera Tucker, before that injury, he looked to be an all-pro level guard. And then Elijah Moore, I mean, you could just talk about this entire Jets core. It seems like everyone on this team is below the age of 25. So the fact that they're already being regarded as a top 10, top 12 team in this league, I mean, it's seriously something dangerous.
Absolutely, and with the young talent comes a lot of swagger. They're a fun team to root for, and hey, I've fallen in love with them a little bit as well, hearing you talk about them so much.
Certainly, I talk about them so often. We could cut it off there. We'll move to the teams that are on the other end of the spectrum, Sam. Two sides to every story. We've talked about the teams on the way up, two teams certainly plummeting on the way down, and we talked about them in Week 9 and 60. What's going on in Green Bay?
Well, I think Aaron Rodgers is the focal point of the problems in Green Bay right now. He's performing way worse than we've seen him really in any point in his career, and Packers fans at this point consider teams led by Aaron Rodgers making a late postseason run, they consider that a birthright, honestly. So the fact that that's likely not going to happen this season is cause for some big concern over in Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers, he's letting the Davante Adams departure throw him for more of a loop than he cares to admit. But I think Aaron Rodgers might be in the waning years of his career in just the fact that the Packers are going to need to look towards their future, look towards their youth here in the coming years and in the coming games.
Certainly, and I mean, you look just a year ago, Aaron Rodgers wins MVP. He's won back-to-back MVPs. I mean, heading into the season, there's just no way you could predict that he's taken this big of a step back. But I mean, or could you? You look at management, Sam, it feels like it may be too little, too late, bringing in Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, neither of which have been able to stay healthy and stay on the field. Davante Adams, he left in the offseason. I mean, it's crazy. I can't say I predicted this Packers team that was, I mean, projected to make a late postseason run this season to potentially miss the playoffs. But, I mean, that's not out of the question at this point.
No, too little too late, though, I think is a hallmark in Green Bay right now. Management, I don't love to point the finger directly at them. They aren't the ones playing on the field, but the drafting has just been a catastrophe in recent years, and Aaron Rodgers just doesn't have the youth, just doesn't have the fire, I think, that he used to, and perhaps it's time for a change in Green Bay soon. I think Packers fans and Packers management is starting to realize that as well.
Certainly, and I mean, maybe we'll see if Jordan Love is the answer here in the future. We haven't heard too much out of Green Bay in terms of him, so interesting to look at there. But a team that did make a quarterback change, Sam, that's your Colts, and unfortunately, they're on the wrong side of this one. They got the doors blown off of them by the New England Patriots this week.
Yeah, it was a rough weekend in Foxborough, to say the least, and you hate to see Frank Reich go out that way. I know I touched on that a little bit earlier, but the Colts just couldn't get anything done on offense. Sam Ehlinger still hasn't thrown an interception, which, hey, I'm all for that.
Nor has he thrown a touchdown.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It just hasn't been flashy from him. It's not what I expected. He's not the answer long term. I think everyone in Indianapolis understands that as well. But he's better than Matt Ryan was playing. He at least gives us chances to win games rather than single-handedly losing the Colts games. And I think Jeff Saturday, adding him as a coach, just to give a little change in the way things are run, try and give this team a little energy, a little boost in the coming weeks, see if the Colts can't make do with what is really a subpar AFC South.
I mean, certainly, they play in one of the weaker divisions in football, and Sam Ehlinger maybe hasn't performed the part, but at least he gives Colts fans something to watch for, something to be hopeful. You've got the young gunslinger back there from Texas. Who knows? Maybe he's the answer, maybe not. Same goes for Jeff Saturday. I know we're going to get to both of them in a little bit, but first we have our next segment here, Sam. Fan favorite, 4 games, 4 key picks, this time for Week 10. Sam, the first game that we'll look at, the Seattle Seahawks, they'll head to Munich, Germany. Neutral field here, they'll play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Who do you like in that one?
Yeah, this is a super fun one, and there's a lot of great games all across the NFL, but we look particularly to this one because of how these two teams are shaping up at the top of their respective divisions. Let's set the scene, though, before we get into it. Seattle literally has to travel to the other side of the world, to Munich, Germany. I understand any travel to Munich is going to be a bit of jet lag, but a 9-hour difference between Seattle, Washington, and Munich, Germany. Just something to keep your mind on when you're up early watching football on Sunday. To go along with that, though, these are two teams that are trending in the right direction right now. Seattle a little more so, 4 straight wins, but that possibly opens up the opportunity for a trap game, a slip-up for Seattle. As for Tampa Bay, maybe Tom Brady has figured things out. Post-divorce Brady, maybe he's a different quarterback. This game, essentially, in my mind, comes down to what Tom Brady can produce on the field. If he has figured this out, Tampa Bay has a chance to really knock off Seattle, and I like the Bucs in this game, simply because I think Tom Brady and his Buccaneers have more talent on the field right now than does Seattle. It's hard to argue with what Geno Smith has done with this team this year, but I just think it's a bit of a trap game. I think Tom Brady has figured things out, and I think his talent in Munich is going to get the job done.
Now, Sam, I liked what you said about Seattle having to travel a long way, because that can't be overstated. I mean, that is a tough travel.
It is.
But I don't like what you said about the talent, because I'll tell you what, I look at these two rosters on paper right now, and Seattle's playing better football at every position on the field. I mean, Tom Brady, maybe got back on track in a 16-13 win, but that's not the Tom Brady we know. He should be blowing the doors off of teams, and it just hasn't been happening. Tariq Woolen, Kobe Bryant, I mean, they're one of the better cornerback duos in the NFL right now. Seattle, they have looked really good. They're playing team football. Pete Carroll has his guys firing on all cylinders. Geno Smith, I mean, we've talked about him a lot. The West Virginia product, he has looked awesome. Give me the Seahawks in this one, and I don't think it's going to be relatively close. I really like what I've been seeing from them. They've won 4 in a row. As for the Buccaneers, it feels like they're scraping their way by in their wins. Regardless, Germany, they get 2 of the NFC's top teams to watch. I mean, that's got to be fun.
Yeah, I am going to, of course, have to disagree with you, but I do like what you said about Seattle firing on all cylinders right now. They've got a fiery team. Both of these teams are fun to watch right now. And you saw Tom Brady in his post-game press conference, last week. He was fired up. Who cares that it was a 16-13 win? I know it's cliche, but a win's a win, and I like Tampa Bay right now just because I think they're starting to figure things out at the right time.
I see where both sides are coming from. I think that'll be an interesting game regardless. Lucky for us, we'll get to see it early in the morning. Always fun on an NFL Sunday. Not something that happens too often, but I mean, hey, with moving to more international games, just more and more opportunities for NFL fans worldwide to get involved with the game. But we'll go back to the American turf here. The Vikings, they're going to head to Buffalo. They'll take on the Bills. And Sam, we talked about this one a little bit before the show. I know we're going to disagree, but I want to hear your point. Why are you taking the Bills?
Well, this game is so intriguing compared to the rest, and that's saying something because this is a weekend full of fantastic football. But what I like about the Bills on Sunday is the fact that they lost their previous game, okay? Josh Allen, he might have tweaked that UCL a little bit in that loss against the Jets. That being said, he's a fiery guy. He's not going to have the same performance this week that he did last week. Perhaps the worst performance of his career last week. We both know he's not going to back that up with another subpar performance. To go along with the Vikings, though, they're 7-1. They've got a better record than the Bills do, but Minnesota has not really played anybody right now. Their one loss is against the Eagles. They got trounced on Monday Night Football, but the only win for Minnesota against a team with a record above 500 was against the Dolphins without Tua. So Minnesota hasn't really played anybody yet. Kirk may have the swagger in recent weeks, but I think the Bills get it done, rebounding after a tough loss, a tough upset last week. The Vikings are a good team, but I think the Bills are perhaps an elite team in football right now, and I think this week is going to showcase that. Bills get it done at home.
Well, Sam, I'll tell you what, I don't care who the Vikings have played. Good football teams, they go out on the field and they win, and that's what the Vikings have been doing. They didn't pick their schedule.
True.
They've played the teams that they've been scheduled, and they have played well. This Vikings team, I like them to get it done, and you talked about Josh Allen, that UCL in the elbow. That's something to monitor. He hasn't practiced all week. He did not practice Wednesday, nor Thursday, nor Friday. Definitely something to look at, regardless of if it's him or Case Keenum. I don't like this Bills offense to dominate time of possession. That's something the Vikings have done really well this season. And Sam, get this. The Vikings, according to Fox Sports, currently the 3rd healthiest team in football. The Bills, they're bottom 3. They're currently 29th. They are banged up. And I mean, you just look at both sides of the game. Yeah, if they're both healthy, give me the Bills. But Josh Allen, he's got the UCL injury. That entire defense, it's battered. Give me Justin Jefferson. Give me Kirk Cousins. Give me this least talked about 7-1 team in NFL history. The Vikings, they'll move to 8-1. This is their statement win. You talked about they haven't had one. This will be it.
I see. What I don't like about that take is that I don't think Kirk Cousins is necessarily a winner. Regardless of if Josh Allen is banged up a little bit, I think Josh Allen is a winner, and I think he can play a little unhealthy. He's one of the premier quarterbacks in the league right now, and regardless of what Kirk Cousins does at 12 noon on Sundays or 1 o'clock noon, depending on what time zone you're in, or 1 o'clock, depending on what time zone you're in. I just don't think Kirk Cousins is going to get it done in big games. He struggles when the lights are the brightest, and the lights are certainly going to be bright this weekend. I think the Bills get it done because they've been here before.
Certainly. I mean, definitely will be an interesting game. You mentioned it's an interesting week, and that might be the most interesting game. I mean, Week 10, we've got a lot of games to look forward to. We'll go to another NFC matchup here. The Cowboys, they're going to head to Green Bay, a struggling Packers team. Who are you taking, Sam?
Well, this is, of course, a hallmark matchup in football. Just as an NFL fan, you've got to love this. When the Packers take on the Cowboys, 2 of the most loved teams in America, but also 2 of the most hated. It's just fun to tune into. Unfortunately, though, I don't think it's going to be on the same caliber that we've been accustomed to in recent years for Packers-Cowboys matchups. And there's one man at the focal point of that, Aaron Rodgers. We've already talked about him a little bit. Rodgers had 3 picks last week against what has been an abysmal Detroit defense. They have really struggled so far, but the fact that Rodgers' performance was so bad was a telltale sign that maybe the Packers have dropped the ball this season a little bit. He's going to face a defense in Dallas this weekend that is significantly more talented than Detroit's defense. This pass rush for Dallas, they're legit. I mean, they are going to get after a subpar at best Green Bay offensive line. They're going to make Rodgers escape the pocket, use whatever youthfulness he has left. I don't think he has enough, but I think Rodgers is just going to make more mistakes. And to make matters worse for Green Bay, the Cowboys, they're getting Ezekiel Elliott back this week. And while there is going to be some drama between Zeke and Tony Pollard as to who's going to get the majority of the carries, I think the fact that they are going to be competing against each other creates an interesting dynamic in Dallas that can really boost this offense to the next level against a struggling Packers rush defense. Give me the Cowboys. I don't think they blow the Packers out of the water, but I think they win handily in Lambeau.
Sam, we're finally going to agree. Give me the Cowboys because I like them boys this week.
Absolutely.
Top 5 NFL defense, you mentioned it. The Packers could barely muster together 9 points against arguably the worst defense in the league. I don't see that really improving against this team that's playing so well. Micah Parsons, the current favorite for Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, that does not go understated. This team is looking really good, and the Packers, it feels like everything is going south for them. The deadline's passed, so there's no more moves that can be made, but the Packers, I mean, it feels like too little, too late. If they lose to the Cowboys here, this could be the turning point in the season, and I think that turning point may have already even happened. This Packers team, they're headed down. I like it to continue in that direction. The Cowboys, give me that defense, give me that offense. I think they're better on all 3 phases of the game. Dallas Cowboys ringing home. They're beating the Packers this week.
So happy we could finally agree on one. Too bad that perhaps it was the most obvious of the picks that we'll make today. Green Bay is certainly struggling right now.
Right, well, we have one more game to get to, Sam. We'll see about this one. The Los Angeles Chargers, they'll head upstate to San Francisco. They'll take on the 49ers.
Yeah, this is a fun West Coast matchup, and what I look at this matchup for is these offenses have underperformed this year. We're talking about a Chargers offense that is really banged up, especially at the wide receiver position, and we're looking at a 49ers offense led by Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, regardless of what you think of Jimmy Garoppolo, he's not the best quarterback in the NFL. That being said, I still think we were in for a high-scoring game on Sunday Night Football. You look at this, and we see the first week where we'll get a fully incorporated Christian McCaffrey alongside a healthy Deebo Samuel plus George Kittle. Regardless of what you think of Jimmy G, he can use those weapons. Just about any quarterback in the NFL can use those weapons effectively. Not to mention the fact that Mike Williams is still day-to-day as the receiver for the Chargers. Regardless of whether or not he plays, I don't think he's going to have a big impact. I think Justin Herbert is a good enough quarterback to still make things happen against an iffy, at best, San Francisco defense. He's still going to be slinging it downfield to whoever lines up at wide receiver. That being said, there's just more talent, in my opinion, on the field for San Francisco, and I think those weapons are going to be utilized perfectly by Jimmy Garoppolo. Give me the 49ers in this one.
Yeah, and well, Sam, you mentioned that Christian McCaffrey is finally going to get that full workload. Well, I got a little nugget for you. Atlanta last week, they ran for 201 yards against that Chargers rush defense.
Yeah.
I mean, they have not looked good this season. I mean, I have to imagine Christian McCaffrey and company, they do even better. Justin Herbert, he threw the ball 43 times last week. He only averaged 5 yards a play. I mean, that is absolutely abysmal. I'm going to agree with you. Give me the 49ers at home in front of those Bay Area fans. I really like what I've seen from them this season. And as for the Chargers, I mean, just like some of these other teams we've talked about, it feels like they can't catch a break with the injury bug. Everyone's hurt at the wrong time of the season. As for the Niners, I mean, McCaffrey, he's back. This will be his statement game. Give me San Francisco. Give me the 49ers to beat the Chargers.
I will say, though, about this game, don't expect the cleanest game from really either of these two sides. I think it's going to be sloppy football, and I think that makes it fun to watch. I think that's going to keep it close just because these two defenses have certainly struggled. I think Justin Herbert's going to find a way to score the football. Whether or not it's enough to keep up with Jimmy Garoppolo and company is another story, but look for a fun one on Sunday night.
Yeah, and Sam, you want to talk about fun to watch? We'll get into this next segment. We're going to go to Hot Takes. Sam, this is a fun one. What is something that you're just banging home this week? What is a really hot take that you're a fan of?
Well, it's called Hot Takes for a reason. I'm going to start with a super spicy one. A game that's not getting a whole lot of coverage this weekend is Kansas City against Jacksonville. Now, there is still a take to be had, though. I think Kansas City not only covers the spread in this game, I think they blow Jacksonville out. I'm talking 20-plus point victory against the Jaguars. I think perhaps the largest margin of victory that we'll see in an NFL game this season. The line is currently sitting at 9.5 points in favor of Kansas City. Kansas City has struggled against teams built like the Jaguars, though. They've struggled against the AFC South. An early season loss against Indianapolis, that was a head-scratcher. Took them an extra overtime period last week against Tennessee before they finally beat the Titans. But essentially what these AFC South teams are built like, they've got a strong run game and a stingy defense, no real passing attack. You think that should be pretty handleable for Patrick Mahomes and company, but it really hasn't been this season. However, they've now had 2 weeks in a row to prepare for two teams built like that, and I think this is the week that Andy Reid finally puts it into practice, gets his team fired up. I think it's going to be a huge win for the Chiefs over the Jaguars. Patrick Mahomes is going to toast the 22nd ranked pass defense in football in Jacksonville, and I think the Chiefs are going to stop the run, force Trevor Lawrence to make mistakes. An emotional win for Jacksonville last week, but I think that honeymoon period has already fallen off. Give me the Chiefs to absolutely roll in this one, 20-plus points.
Well, Sam, you like them to win by 20-plus. I'm going to go on the exact opposite side of the spectrum here. Give me the Giants. Give me the Texans. They're going to combine for less than 20 points combined in that matchup. You mentioned the AFC South. You mentioned the run game. I like Dameon Pierce a lot, and I'm also a big Saquon Barkley guy. I think that what that does is essentially this is just going to be a slugfest, a time of possession battle that just goes all the way to the wire, and that's one where I just don't see many points getting scored. I mean, try to name 3 targets on both of these offenses. It's hard. It really is. Chris Moore for the Texans. I mean, who are these teams throwing the ball to? Give me a low-scoring game. I do like the Giants in that one, but I don't think it's going to be in any form of commanding fashion. The Giants, they're going to walk away with a win over the Texans, but it's going to stay under 20 total points.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable take. It might be hot, but I'm not going to disagree with that. I say no way just because, of course, the NFL's known for high-scoring offenses. But, hey, these are two offenses that are not firing on all cylinders right now. However, the Giants, I still think, are a really good team out of the NFC. So this should be a fun one to watch, as are all the games this weekend.
Certainly, Sam. We've both done one. We'll each get one more, and I know this is one you're excited to get to. What's your second hot take?
Yeah, and AJ, this might not be my most popular take, but certainly it's the one I'm the most excited about. I think Jeff Saturday, new head coach in Indianapolis, gets his first win with the headset against Las Vegas at the Raiders' place. I think Jeff Saturday is a great motivator. Look, he has absolutely nothing to lose in this game as the new coach of Indianapolis. Josh McDaniels, on the other hand, I think he has everything to lose. He's got a 2-6 Raiders team, an abysmal team, really, worse than I think people give them credit for. And he has really underperformed with this group this year. I mean, they got Devontae Adams in the offseason, one of the biggest signings. So the fact that the Raiders have struggled so much puts McDaniels in a similar seat that Frank Reich, former Indianapolis head coach, was just in. I think McDaniels could get the boot perhaps after this week, but Jeff Saturday, as a motivator, as a leader, he is the guy right now that Indianapolis needs just to string together a couple of wins. I think he starts strong on Sunday.
Certainly will. I mean, it'll be interesting to watch. I mean, the 5-time Pro Bowler, every Colts fan seems to be excited, and that's all you could ask for in Indianapolis. I mean, a season that has not gone as planned. Jeff Saturday at least brings hope to the players, to that locker room, and to the fans.
I would certainly agree. Jeff Saturday is one of my favorite guys in Indianapolis Colts history. So the fact that he's still with the organization in such a big role, it's fun to watch.
Right, and I'm going to go to my last hot take, Sam. We already talked about this game, and I'm going to stick with it. Justin Jefferson, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. This Bills secondary, it's completely beat up. Give me Justin Jefferson to have 150-plus yards and a touchdown this Sunday in a win over the Bills. The Bills are favored to win this game. I don't think it's going to happen. We've already talked about that. But as for Justin Jefferson, I mean, he's one of the better wide receivers in this league. Some would say he's the best, and I mean, that's not even that absurd. He is very, very good at what he does. Regardless of if Trey White is back or not, I really like Justin Jefferson, and I think he's going to have a big week.
And regardless of the fact that I did pick the Bills, I think Justin Jefferson, of course, is an elite talent in football right now, and Kirk Cousins has certainly shown some great strengths in throwing him the football especially. So, yeah, I do think we're going to have a big performance from Justin Jefferson this weekend. I think it'll make for a great game over in Buffalo.
Certainly. And, Sam, while we're talking about big performances, that'll lead us to our final segment of the show. We'll go to Fantasy Football Starts and Sits. And Sam, who's a player that you're looking to start in every single one of your leagues this week?
Well, I'm looking at Joshua Palmer. You might not have heard of him. He's a recent addition to Los Angeles, the Chargers, at the wideout position. With Mike Williams still being very much day-to-day, I think this gives an opportunity for Joshua Palmer to make a big leap this week. He didn't have a spectacular game last week necessarily, but we chatted about this a little bit earlier, that Justin Herbert has to find somebody to throw the ball to, right? And I think Joshua Palmer is the answer right now. We're going to see an air raid offense for Los Angeles, regardless of whether or not they're up to the task with the number of injuries they have. I think that bodes well for all fantasy owners of Joshua Palmer. I mean, he had 8 receptions for 106 yards last week, only 1 touchdown on the season, but I think with the fact that he's going to be targeted a lot this week, I could see a ceiling of 2 touchdowns this week for Palmer. Some big points could be headed his way if things play out correctly. If nobody in your league has this guy, pick him up. He might not shine for the rest of the season, but these next couple of weeks, I think Joshua Palmer could be a big asset.
Well, this is now 2 consecutive weeks that my co-host has told you to start Joshua Palmer. Definitely interesting. I mean, in terms of an NFL talent, he's not my favorite guy. He had a multitude of drops last week, but in terms of fantasy, I mean, how can you not love it? He's getting the targets, as you mentioned, in a 100-yard game last week. I mean, that's money. 18 points last week. I can certainly see it happening again. I mean, who else is Herbert going to throw the ball to, Sam?
I don't think there's anybody. He's the go-to guy right now, and that should make fantasy owners really excited.
And another guy that I think is going to turn into the go-to guy in that offense, I'm going to go to tell you to start George Pickens this week. I mean, they moved away from Chase Claypool. To me, that's the front office. That's this entire organization showing we have trust in the second-round rookie, and why not? I mean, George Pickens can make all of the plays. He has the ability to go up and grab the ball. His volume is only going to go up for the rest of the season. I think that starts this week with his favorable matchup against the Saints.
Yeah, George Pickens is a guy that could really catch fire here in the last few weeks of the season, and we've seen a bit of a theme this season, as we typically do. Rookies start to catch fire as the season rolls on. I think he's going to be a go-to target here sooner rather than later, so I really like that. Get him in the starting lineup ASAP.
I agree. Just getting ahead of the curve, if you will, guessing that this will be that breakout week. I think that everyone's predicting George Pickens will have a great rest of the season. It's just a matter of when him and Pickett get on the same page.
Yeah.
I think it's sooner rather than later. Let me have him in my starting lineup against the Saints in any league that I can. But Sam, 2 sides to every story. We talked about a guy that we want to start in every league. Who's a guy you would advise everybody to stay away from this week?
I need you to follow along with me on this one, because I think there's going to be a lot of hate headed my way for this. I'm going to go with Terry McLaurin, wide receiver for the Washington Commanders. There is no debating that Terry McLaurin is one of the top talents at the wide receiver position in the NFL, but he has not produced in the end zone this season. Only 2 touchdowns for McLaurin this year. He hasn't scored a touchdown since late October, October 23rd. And he was held to just 55 yards last week against a pass defense that has certainly struggled in Minnesota. To make matters worse, his Commanders are taking on the 8-0 Eagles this week on Monday Night Football. This game has nothing to do with Washington. It's all about the Eagles. It's what they are able to do. They're going to get a chance to show a national audience how much talent they have. Still a lot of questions surrounding the Eagles, but I think this pass defense is going to lock McLaurin down. You don't want to put the fate of your fantasy game in a guy playing on Monday night really a lot anyways, but the fact that he is playing such a talented team, I just want to stay hands off of Terry McLaurin right now. I'm not saying for the rest of the season, but at least for this week, he's not a guy I would touch.
Yeah, and I really don't have a problem with that, Sam. I mean, it's just so hard to start anyone against this Philadelphia secondary. Yeah. It feels like them, the Jets, maybe we're starting to put the Seahawks in that conversation. These teams with the top secondaries in the league, I mean, they're starting to have a real fantasy impact. I mean, you look at this Eagles schedule, they locked up Justin Jefferson. They've locked up some of the best players in this league. And Terry McLaurin, you mentioned he's one of the premier talents, but I don't see him getting it done either. That's one that I like.
Yeah, I think McLaurin is still a great receiver, but this is just not the right circumstances for him to be making a big performance in terms of a fantasy standpoint.
And Sam, I'm going to tell you about a guy in terms of talent that I really like, but I just don't see much fantasy value moving forward, and that's big name DeAndre Swift. I mean, it's a really hard situation. Swift, get this, Sam, he has had over 7 carries once this season. The Lions have made it clear that they are worried about the re-injury of Swift. I mean, he has a new injury every season. It feels so unfortunate for such a good talent, but really, until the Lions show that they're going to use this guy in the backfield, I would advise trading him for absolutely any value you could get. DeAndre Swift is a guy that I would pivot off of. They've shown that they like Jamal Williams. He has had a a bigger role week in and week out than Swift, and it's just an unfortunate situation because Swift was a guy with so much talent, but this Lions team clearly really taking the workload off of his back and giving it to Jamal Williams.
Yeah, you talk about trading in Fantasy League. I think a trade could be coming in terms of actual football with DeAndre Swift. Perhaps it's just time for a change of scenery. That front office, the coaching staff, obviously doesn't trust him to run the football without injuring himself. So maybe a change of scene could really switch up the way he plays the game, get him motivated again, become a top running back in this league and a top running back on his team. I think that could do wonders for him. I really like that take. Don't have a problem with sitting him at all.
Certainly, and I mean, so unfortunate to have to sit your first, maybe second round pick, and it's a hard thing to do. You see the name DeAndre Swift. It's hard to put him on your bench, but until he proves you as a fantasy owner, otherwise, there's no reason to have him starting, Sam.
I would completely agree, but AJ, you know me. We're in the same fantasy league. This is not necessarily my specialty in terms of fantasy football, but I know you put a lot of effort into your fantasy football takes, and I would have to agree with this one for sure.
Certainly. And Sam, I think that's where we're going to leave it off. That'll be a wrap. I really appreciate you coming on the show. It was a good one.
Yeah, it was. Thanks for having me. Love to be here again. Always excited for the HB Toss.
Certainly. And without further ado, that was the HB Toss brought to you by the creative storytellers of Ball State Sports Link. For Sam Neiger, I'm AJ Swiatek, and we're signing off.